Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature Underground. As the saying goes, my name is Hunter Lanier, and I am here today with yet another review of an upcoming movie. This time it is the suspiciously comma-less Die My Love, directed by Lynne Ramsay and starring Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. Nick Nolte and Sissy Spacek also slip in there. Die My Love is one of those movies that really prides itself on always being just out of reach. When it first starts, I was initially processing it as a movie about a woman going through this nasty cocktail of postpartum depression and cabin fever. Then the film starts to open up, and it seems to be more about the day-to-day milieu of living a life without a broader purpose. Then the Robert Pattinson character, the husband, becomes more prevalent, and the film seems to be about a flimsy relationship breaking into a million pieces as it tries to push through the atmosphere into parenthood. Then the film gets even broader, and you remember the title, and you start to think, oh, is this movie just an audit on self-destruction in all its various forms? At one point, I even got the funny feeling that I was watching a ghost story. I think all of these ideas are there, and as the film goes on, these ideas climb onto each other's shoulders until it ends up being a fairly imposing movie. Now, this elusiveness of meaning would be more frustrating than alluring if the movie didn't work so well on the scene-by-scene level. For as ambiguous as the story is, it's consistently entertaining, unexpectedly funny, visually elegant, and the performances really do a great job of drawing you in. There are many interesting angles to Die My Love, but I am going to focus on two particular choices the movie makes that I think are uniquely curious. The first is that we never get to know the married couple at the center of the film, Grace and Jackson, played by Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. We never get to know them before they move into this abandoned house with their newborn child. This is especially relevant to Grace because we never really get a sense of how abnormal her behavior in the movie actually is. We're not given any kind of contrast that we can draw. There seems to be a revealing flashback at one point in the movie, but then the film's dream logic, which governs the story like a mad king, undercuts that moment. The other notable choice is that there are hints that Grace is a writer, that she plans to use her spare time in this isolated home writing a book. Yet, for as bored as she gets, we never actually see her write. One of my first thoughts while, like in the movie's first act, before I started to question all of my notions about the movie, was how the film reflects a couple who no longer have common goals. You know, they've gotten married, they've had a kid, they've moved in together, and now what? To quote Annie Hall, their relationship has become a dead shark, and we spend, the next 2 hours of the movie watching it rot. Even the house that they move into is like a dead thing. It's like they're moving into a carcass. And even beyond the lack of a common goal, they both seem to lack individual goals as well. Writing seems like something that would effectively absorb a lot of Grace's pent-up good and bad energy, and yet we never see her do it. We never see her do it, which is an important distinction and itself raises even more questions. We do see her wander through the house like a bored child, talking to stuffed animals. At one point, she licks a window presumably because she's done everything else and she hasn't done that yet. Of the many questions the movie raises without directly answering, the writing question to me is the one that I'm most curious about. I alluded to the performances earlier, and I do think they deserve some recognition. I'm usually a little hesitant to talk about the acting in movies because actors already get, all the attention. But it's hard to talk about Die My Love without talking about what Jennifer Lawrence does. There's no clear arc to her character, so what the performance lacks in change, it has to make up for in depth. In other words, she has to mine the same ground over and over again with subtle differences, instead of having the luxury of moving to a new emotional territory. And she ends up doing that very well. In fact, her performance and to some degree the movie as a whole, it's hard not for me to think back on one of my favorite movies of all time, a surefire first ballot entry into the feature pantheon, and that is John Cassavetes' A Woman Under the Influence, which is not only, I think, easily Cassavetes' best movie, but also contains one of the greatest lead performances ever in a movie with Gena Rowlands. For as many meaningful similarities as there are between Die My Love and A Woman Under the Influence, there are as many meaningful differences. So there's not a lot of value to be had in comparing the two, but they certainly share some cinematic genetics. Needless to say, though, A Woman Under the Influence is much more grounded, much more governed by street logic than dream logic. And before I move away from talking about the actors, I have to say that for as many great movies as I've seen him in, and for as many great and varied characters as I've seen him play, it has not occurred to me until just this movie, Die My Love, that there is a lot of Nicolas Cage in Robert Pattinson, much more than I had initially thought. If you don't believe me, go see the movie and then come back and tell me if I'm wrong. As I said before, there are so many scenes and just so much in general in this movie that you can sink your teeth into. But I did want to mention specifically a scene that takes place at a kind of insipid suburban party, the kind of party where all the guys are wearing Hawaiian shirts and khaki shorts and talking about football, and all of the women are dipping baby carrots in ranch and talking about real estate, finances, or vacations. Grace gets caught in the small talk vortex of this woman, and this woman starts talking to her, and she starts saying all the right things, almost as if she has been watching the movie with you. And yet nothing she says has the least effect on Grace. All of the woman's comments just bounce off Grace's disassociated face. But it's a fascinating moment where the movie subtly breaks the fourth wall to shoot down all of your rote theories of what's happening. And I don't think I've ever seen a movie do that before. So I thought that was really cool, and I commend the idea. Well, those are all my thoughts on Die My Love. Now is the time for you to let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. Although I take that back, those actually aren't all of my thoughts. The movie, I just saw it this morning, so it's still fresh, and, you can probably tell it's one of those movies where it hasn't fully congealed in my head yet. I think a completed viewing will do a lot to inform a second viewing. This seems like the kind of movie where that happens. So maybe not, but that's what I suspect. That's a fancy way of saying I look forward to watching it again. And not that Die My Love is as much about motherhood as it initially seems to be, but it is interesting that this movie has come out so close to If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which is explicitly about motherhood. It makes the two movies feel a little bit like siblings separated at birth. Next up, I am seeing The Running Man next week. I was also just sent the new Richard Linklater movie, the one about Breathless, not the other one, with Ethan Hawke. I hope to do a review of one of those next week and have that out by next week. If you have noticed, I have been gone, just in the spirit of full transparency. For the last month, there have been no videos. That is because I am actively trying to get a short film made, and I'm pulling all the parts together, and it's taking up a lot of bandwidth. So just so you know, I didn't go into a coma. All excuses aside, I beg your forgiveness, and I kindly ask that in the instance of any more absences on my part, that you hold closely to the idea that every day underground is a good day.